welcome to my channel. It's another day. I don't even post every day. It's another month, so I decided why not do another celebrity iceberg. And as you guys may already know, these cases will be tragic and disturbing. We will be starting from the bottom and working our way up to the top. So we will be starting with the most disturbing story. So yeah, let's get started. The Dark Abyss. At just 10 years old, Judith Barsi was already a star. She was in a number of film and TV roles, including Cheers, Jaws, and she even lent her voice for the animated movie All Dogs Go to Heaven. But her innocence would soon be taken away, all because of one person's evil ways. Judith was born on June 6, 1978 in sunny Los Angeles, California. She was born to immigrants Joseph Barsi and Maria Barsi. When Maria came to America, she was enamored by the Hollywood world, with the dazzling lights and the way celebrities seemed to glide. It was all just so beautiful, and that is when she realized that her daughter could be a star. Now, Maria did not waste any time, and she quickly taught her daughter about posture, poise, and how to speak eloquently. Even with all this, the chance of Judith making it big in Hollywood was very slim, but somehow the chances were on her side. One day, while Judith was effortlessly gliding on an ice rink, there was a crew nearby filming a commercial. They caught sight of pretty blonde Judith and quickly invited her on set for her first commercial. Delighted, she immediately agreed, and this was only the start of her success. From there, Judith's career as an actress grew. She starred in dozens of commercials, made appearances on TV shows, and appeared in films like Jaws. Everyone who came into contact with this young girl was taken aback by her small size, her enchanting personality, and her sweetness. Now, Judith did very well for herself. She made about $100,000 a year, which her parents used to buy a 3-bedroom house at the western edge of the San Fernando Valley. Maria's dreams seemed to be coming true, and Judith had her whole world ahead of her. But there was one person who wasn't so happy. Judith's father, Joseph Barsi, would soon cast a dark shadow on poor Judith's childhood. As Judith Barsi's star burned brighter, her home life grew ever darker. Outside, everyone was all smiles, but when they were inside their home with the doors and windows carefully shut, poor Judith was overcome with fear. Judith, along with her mother, were being abused by Joseph Barsi, her very own father. He was an alcoholic with blood-curdling rage. Joseph threatened to kill Maria or even kill Judith just so he could happily watch Maria suffer. On one occasion, Joseph Barsi grabbed a kite from Judith. When Judith got worried he'd break it, Joseph called his daughter a spoiled brat who didn't know how to share. Determined to teach his daughter a lesson, he smashed the kite into pieces and left poor Judith in tears. Another time, as Judith was about to fly to the Bahamas for the film Jaws, her father threatened her with a knife. He said, "If you decide not to come back, I will cut your throat." After filming, Judith and Maria visited Judith's father in New York. Joseph took one look at Judith and whispered, "Remember what I told you before you left?" With this, Judith burst into tears and ran out of the room, Scared and helpless, it wasn't long before Judith's abuse at home began to affect her day-to-day life. She began to pluck out all her eyelashes and her cat's whiskers. Poor Judith hated going home every single day. She used to tell her friends, "My daddy is drunk every day, and I know he wants to kill my mother." And shortly before an audition in May 1988, she reached a breaking point. She suddenly became hysterical, crying out, and was belligerent. Judith was suffering and could not take it any longer. This immediately alarmed her agent, and she insisted that Judith see a child psychiatrist who reported the case to the Los Angeles County Department of Child and Family Services. But nothing changed. Maria refused to leave her husband. Still, Maria Barsi took small steps to escape her husband's abuse. She considered divorcing Joseph and even rented an apartment closer to the movie studios where she could escape with Judith while she filmed. But Maria's reluctance in leaving her husband proved fatal. At around 8:30 a.m. on July 27, 1988, one of the Barsi's neighbors heard an explosion next door. As the neighbors rushed out into the street, they saw the Barsi's house engulfed in flames. Panicked, they immediately called 911, but the worst was already done. Police found Judith Barsi in her bed. Maria was found in the hallway. Both had been shot and killed by Joseph a few days before. Their bodies were doused with gasoline, which Joseph ignited shortly before dying by suicide. On July 23, 1982, during filming on the set of Twilight Zone the movie, a horrific accident would take place. This would cost the lives of 53-year-old actor Vic Morrow and two children actors, Mika Dinley, age 7, and Renee Shin Chen, age 6. They were filming a battle scene in which Vic Morrow and the two children were supposed to be running from a pursuing helicopter. However, this quickly turned dark. An explosion was set off at the wrong time. The helicopter's tail rotor was still above it, causing it to fail. At once, the pilot lost complete control of the helicopter. At the same time, Morrow dropped 6-year-old Chen into the water. As he was reaching out to Chen, the helicopter crashed right into the actors. Morrow and Mika were decapitated and mutilated as the helicopter's rotor blade slashed into them. Renee Chen was crushed under the weight. Everyone rushed to help the actors, but quickly turned away at the gruesome sight of their bodies. Following this horrific accident, those in charge of filming were scrutinized. Director John Landis had illegally paid the parents of the child actors under the table to avoid California labor laws, which did not permit the children to work at night. There were other shady deals going on behind the scenes. Associate producer George Falsey Jr. told the children's parents not to tell any firefighters on set that their children were working in the scene. He also hid the children from a fire safety officer who was ensuring everyone's welfare. Because of this, Landis was charged with 5 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Along with him, special effects crew chief Paul Stewart, helicopter pilot Dorsey Wingo, associate producer George Falsey Jr., and unit production manager Dan Allingham were charged with involuntary manslaughter as well. In trial, the defense claimed that the explosions were detonated at the wrong time, which resulted in this tragic accident. There was nothing anyone could do. but the prosecution was not letting them off so easily. Assistant cameraman Randall Robinson testified that production manager Dan Allingham told the pilot, "That's too much. Let's get out of here," when the explosions detonated. But Landis wanted more. He shouted, "Get lower, lower, get over." He wanted the helicopter to continue flying as low as possible, even when it posed a threat to the actors. The pilot then tried to leave the area, but by then he had no control. Stephen Lydecker, another camera operator, testified that Landis had shrugged off warnings about the stunt with the comment, "We may lose the helicopter." At the end of the 9-month trial, director John Landis, special effects crew chief Paul Stewart, helicopter pilot Wingo, associate producer George Folsey Jr., and unit production manager Dan Allingham were all acquitted of their charges. After the trial, John Landis made sure he threw a party for all the jury members celebrating his freedom.
She was the only child I had. Now she has gone.
The tip. It was the 1994 World Cup. It was held in the United States and fans flocked from all over to cheer on their country's football team. These fans were passionate, fierce, and emotional. With each kick and swish, they held their breath in anticipation of a goal. This was the most attended World Cup of all time, with an average attendance of 69,000 people per match. All eyes were on the game. One of that year's favorites was Team Colombia. Now, Colombia was a country ravaged by violence and corruption. There were bombings, kidnappings, and unrest. The nation of Colombia was glued to the screens, hoping for a win that would take them away from the chaos within. With this pressure and support, Colombia was a force. They were fierce in their qualifying matches. They beat Brazil, they beat Argentina 5-0. In 26 matches ahead of the World Cup, they lost only once. Expectations were high. Colombia was the new favorite that was destined to win. This was a joyous time for everyone. There were bets being made left and right on Colombia's destined win. And then the Colombian team lands in California. And that's when things took a drastic turn. On June 18th, they have a nightmare match against Romania in Group A. They lose 3-1 in front of almost 92,000 people at the Rose Bowl. But this was only the start. People back home were furious. The players began receiving death threats. They were worried about their families back home, with the whispers of powerful cartel leaders losing money, betting on the team. Fear gripped the entire team, cause everyone knows what happens if you make the powerful cartel leaders angry. This was the atmosphere leading into the second game of the tournament. They're playing the United States once again at the Rose Bowl. They're terrified. They barely speak before the match. You could slice through the tension with a knife. The game kicks off. Colombia throws everything they've got into attacking the Americans. The crowd cheers as Colombia dominates the play. They block goals, outrun the Americans, and remain hopeful. But then, in the 22nd minute, Andres Escobar is tracking back to defend in the area when the American midfielder John Harkes plays a diagonal cross from the left side of the goal. Andres turns to clear the ball. He hits it. It flies past the goalkeeper. It goes in the net. Goal. USA. Andres Escobar made a mistake. He had no idea that he would pay for it with his life. The team's failure caused a backlash at home. Escobar ignored friends who told him to lie low until it had died down, saying, "I must show my face to my people." He wanted to help them recover from the loss. Yes, he made a mistake, but there is always another chance. He wanted to show his people that life did not have to end here. So only 5 days after the early exit, Escobar was back in his hometown of Medellin when late one night he was approached by a group of men. After reportedly harassing him for scoring a goal against his own team, the men shot and killed him. One attacker reportedly shouted "goal" each time the athlete was shot. As they left, they yelled out, "Thanks for the own goal." The next day, Humberto Munoz, believed to be the gunman, was arrested and confessed to the murder. He had possible ties to Colombian drug traffickers and killed Andres Escobar because of that one mistake. Selena Quintanilla was a superstar. Her unforgettable music and sensational style was nothing short of iconic. Her beautiful voice spoke to the soul. She was a beauty in every way. In the months before her death, Selena was at the height of her career, with 4 studio albums and a Grammy for Best Mexican American Album. She was in the process of recording her first English album. Along with this, Selena was quite the businesswoman. She owned Selena ETC, a growing chain of Texas-based boutiques with in-house salons, where her signature line of clothing and jewelry were sold. The 2 existing locations were based in Corpus Christi and San Antonio. They were managed by 32-year-old Yolanda Saldivar. Yolanda was the president of the Selena fan club and was rumored to be obsessed with the popular singer. Anywhere Yolanda went, bad things always followed. Yolanda was a thief. She used the corporate American Express given to her by Selena to rent Lincoln Town cars, entertain business associates at upscale restaurants, and purchase 2 cell phones for personal use. Staff members at the boutique felt that Yolanda was nice when Selena dropped in, but her true self came to light when Selena was gone. She was mean, rude, entitled, and possessive over Selena. Warnings were given to Selena, but she paid them no attention. Yolanda was the president of the fan club. After all, who could you trust if not your #1 fan? Her staff then complained to her father and business manager, Abraham Quintanilla Jr., who warned his daughter that Yolanda could be dangerous. In March 1995, Selena and her family realized that Yolanda was embezzling funds from the business. She had successfully stolen over $60,000. In a heated confrontation with Selena, her father, and Selena's sister Suzette, Yolanda denied any wrongdoing, arguing that she was in possession of documents that would exonerate her, although she failed to produce them. Selena's father forbade Yolanda from speaking to Selena ever again, but Selena did not pay this any attention. Selena remained in contact with Yolanda as she had the singer's sensitive financial records. On March 25, 1995, Selena had enough. She told her sister Yolanda would be fired soon. On March 30th, 1995, Yolanda called Selena to inform her that she was staying at a Days Inn motel. She told Selena to visit her to collect the promised documents and to come alone. Selena did not trust Yolanda, so she arrived instead with her husband, Chris Perez. Angry that Selena did not listen to her instructions, Yolanda did not allow Selena to collect the documents. The next day, a frustrated Selena returned to the Days Inn motel, and she arrived alone. She asked Yolanda for the documents in a heated argument. At 11:48 a.m., Yolanda produced a .38 caliber handgun, firing it into Selena's right shoulder. Scared and fighting for her life, a wounded Selena ran to the hotel lobby screaming, "Somebody help me!" Yolanda followed in hot pursuit, shooting and screaming obscenities. Selena collapsed in the lobby, bleeding out profusely. Blood covered the entire entrance. Before she lost consciousness, she managed to name her assailant. When police arrived at the scene, they found Yolanda locked in her truck with the handgun gun pointed at her temple, crying, "I can't believe I killed my best friend." There was a 10-hour standoff before she was arrested. Meanwhile, Selena was rushed to Memorial Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead. Yolanda Saldivar pleaded not guilty to the crime, claiming the shooting was accidental, but a jury convicted her of first-degree murder. She received the maximum sentence of life in prison, although she will be released for parole in March 2025. After working on Waitress, the indie film Adrienne Shelly wrote, directed, and starred in for almost 2 years, she couldn't wait to hear if the movie had won a coveted spot at the Sundance Film Festival. After years of hard work, Adrienne was waiting for her big break that was sure to come any day. Everyone who read her script was taken aback by her talent in writing such a heart-wrenching, touching, and funny story. But alas, Adrienne would never learn that Waitress would become one of the top films in the prestigious festival, or that it became a box office success when it hit theaters, and now, almost a decade later, a Tony-nominated hit musical on Broadway. On November 1st, 2006, Adrienne's husband was panicking. He hadn't heard from his wife the entire day and knew something was very wrong. He decided to stop by her West Village apartment. This apartment was her office, where she wrote and worked on her scripts. He had the doorman accompany him to his wife's apartment, as he was terrified of what was waiting inside. As he walked in, his worst fears were confirmed. She was found with a sheet tied around her neck, hanging from the shower curtain rod in her bathroom. It was an apparent suicide. As police and investigators swarmed the scene, her husband knew that this was no suicide. He knew his wife, and she was nothing but elated. She lived for their 3-year-old daughter Sophie, and she found immense joy in her work. There was just no way. He begged the investigators to look for suspects, and with this unrelenting pressure, investigators looked at the crime scene from a new angle. They noticed a dusty footprint on the toilet cover beneath the shower rod. This dirty footprint was in stark contrast to the rest of the apartment. The apartment directly below Adrienne's office was filled with construction workers. There were workers in and out at all times of the day. After careful analysis of their footprints, a suspect was identified, 19-year-old Diego Pilco. He was arrested and he admitted to his crime a day later. According to his initial statements, Adrienne had come down to complain about the construction noise. She had been trying all day to work, but couldn't with the unbearable noise. Diego then grew frustrated and threw his hammer in her direction. It did not hit her, but when she turned around to go back to her office, Diego said he followed in fear of her calling the police. He then grabbed her at her door, so she slapped him, prompting him to strike back. That's when, according to Diego, Adrienne fell, hit her head on the floor, and lost consciousness, making him believe that he'd killed her. A panicked Diego then staged the scene to make it look like a suicide. Adrienne Shelly was still alive at that point and passed away from severe neck compressions from the hanging. The body. John Lennon's death shocked the world. On December 8, 1980, the former Beatle was fatally shot right in front of his Manhattan apartment building. He was assassinated, and one of the most iconic rock stars was gone forever. A few hours before his tragic end, John Lennon was actually having a relatively normal day. Lennon and his wife, Yoko Ono, had just released a new album called Double Fantasy, and they spent that morning promoting the album. First, he and Yoko took a few photographs for Rolling Stone before they met with the crew from RKO Radio at John Lennon's apartment building to tape John's final interview. During the interview, John made some eerie remarks, not knowing his death was a few hours away.
Because I always consider my work one piece whether it be with Beatles, David Bowie, Elton John, Yoko Ono, and I consider that my work won't be finished until I'm dead and buried, and I hope that's a long, long time. And we're going into an unknown future, but we're still all here. We're still, wow, there's life, there's hope.
A short while later, the interview wrapped up, and John and his wife Yoko made their way out of their apartment building. Eagerly waiting outside was a man named Mark Chapman. He held a copy of Double Fantasy in his hands. As Lennon walked closer, Mark Chapman silently held out his copy of Double Fantasy, which Lennon signed. Throughout all this, Chapman remained silent. After signing, John asked, "Is this all you want?" And again, Chapman said nothing. It must be noted that Mark Chapman was no ordinary fan. He was a man set on murder. He had just sized up his target, and now it was only a matter of time. His hatred started when John Lennon, a former Beatle, stated that his group was more popular than Jesus. In Mark's eyes, John was nothing more than a poser, and he needed to be put in his place. Chapman was now eagerly waiting for the perfect time to commit the murder. After the initial meeting, Mark slunk back into the shadows. He watched as Lennon and Yoko got into their limousine and drove away. And then he waited. At 10:50 p.m. on December 8, 1980, John Lennon and Yoko Ono returned home. At the sight of his target, Mark Chapman knew that his time had come. This is what he had been waiting for. As Lennon walked toward his home, Mark Chapman raised his weapon. He fired his gun 5 times. John staggered into the building, crying, "I'm shot." As his wife heard the shots, she rushed for cover before realizing that her beloved husband was shot. She rushed to his side as he lay there with a blank look on his face. It was then that Yoko cried in despair as she knew her husband was gone. The doorman rushed to the scene and grabbed Mark Chapman before he could flee. He shook the gun away from his grasp and waited for police to arrive. Mark Chapman would be sentenced to 20 years to life for the cold-blooded murder of a legend gone too soon. Christina Grimmie was born on March 12, 1994 in Marlton, New Jersey. As a young girl, she loved gaming and singing. She would spend her days recording herself on her bedroom floor to her adoring online fans on YouTube. She quickly amassed a large fan base, and in 2010, she was discovered by production company LH7 Management after uploading her rendition of Miley Cyrus's hit song Party in the USA, which now has more than 13 million views.
Hi, I'm gonna sing Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus. When it gets to the high notes, I don't really, it's kind of difficult for me to sing. My voice has been going through a lot of crappy problems. I hope you like it though, so. I hopped off the plane at LAX with my dream in my cardigan. Welcome to the land of fame excess. Am I gonna fit in?
Her fans adored her, and one of those obsessed fans was Kevin Loibl. Kevin first caught sight of the beautiful Christina Grimmie when he was aimlessly scrolling on YouTube. In his mind, this beautiful Christina was a perfect match, but he wanted to better himself for her. He lost 50 pounds, got LASIK eye surgery, had his teeth whitened, and got hair implants to cover up his receding hairline. Christina's devout Christian faith even sparked a change in his beliefs. He told his friends that Christina allowed him to see the world in a new light, and he was sure there was God within her. He was filled with joy and told everyone he knew that he met his soulmate and they would be together forever. Meanwhile, Christina's career was soaring to new heights. Her family was supportive of her dreams, and with her brother Mark by her side, they moved to California. And with her star power, Christina excelled at everything that came her way. In 2014, she rocked the stage on the popular singing show The Voice, and her incredible vocal range blew the minds of the judges. She turned 4 chairs and received endless praise. Christina was moving up, and under the mentorship of Maroon 5's Adam Levine, she continued continued to wow viewers with a string of powerful covers that showcased her ability to belt out and hold long notes. After finishing third on The Voice, there was no slowing down. Christina released an album and several other original songs, while also continuously putting up covers on YouTube for her adoring fans. But soon, it was time to ditch the screen and give her fans the chance to meet her face to face. In 2016, Christina went on tour with the band Before You Exit. She would open up the concert, and then after the show, she would do meet and greets for her adoring fans who traveled hundreds of miles just to hear her voice. And June 10th, 2016 was supposed to be no different. It was just another tour day. The bus rolled into Orlando, Florida a little before noon. Christina was excited. This would be her last concert before she could go home to Los Angeles and see her family and dog Chloe. Her brother had also gone with her, and he was in charge of the merchandise table at the back of the theater. Before long, the show was about to begin. Christina wore her black high-heeled boots, a black wraparound skirt, and a belly shirt. She was confident and ready to give the performance of a lifetime. Christina strutted across the stage, belting out song after song to hundreds of fans. Amid the shrieking girls and young fans, an odd audience member stuck out. A man lingered in the back of the Plaza Live Theater, watching and waiting. This man was none other than Kevin Loibl. He dug his hands into the pockets of his black jeans as he leaned against a wall. He kept adjusting his dark baseball cap as he looked nervously around, but no one seemed to pay him any attention. After the show, he got in line behind dozens of other fans with backstage passes, waiting to meet the 22-year-old singer. He shifted his weight back and forth, nervously waiting in anticipation. The line slowly started to inch forward, little by little, and soon it was his turn. Christina turned to him with a big smile plastered on her face. She opened her arms to greet him with a giant hug. In return, Kevin Loibl pulled out a black 9mm Glock and fired 5 shots, hitting her 3 times at point-blank range. As the shots rang out, her brother Mark, who was still at the merchandise table, looked up and saw Kevin with a gun and his sister falling to the ground. Instantly, Mark tackled Kevin to the ground and managed to wrestle the gun away from him. He kept looking over at his sister, but she lay motionless on the ground. Somehow, Kevin managed to free himself from Mark's grip, and he slowly backed himself into the wall and pulled out a second handgun. Mark was sure this was the end of him, but as he watched in horror, Kevin raised the firearm to the side of his head and pulled the trigger. With that fatal shot, Kevin lay dead on the floor, and everyone rushed to Christina's side. Mark bent down and felt a weak pulse, then lost it and started CPR. Emergency crews rushed her to Orlando Regional Medical Center, but it was to no avail. Christina Grimmie was only 22 when her life was tragically cut short.
The Surface.
Marvin Gaye was the prince of Motown. He put out beautiful soul music with an emphasis on sensitivity and romantic grace. His lyrics, music, and striking voice captured the hearts of many fans. He moved successfully from genre to anything that sparked his creativity. However, even though Marvin Gaye was successful, he had his share of personal struggles, including drug drug addiction, divorce, and tax issues. This cast a dark shadow on his career and led him to take frequent breaks. Even with all this, in 1982, Marvin made an inspiring comeback with Midnight Love. It was a mellow album with a funky vibe, and people everywhere loved it. A year later, he won his first Grammy in February 1983. It seemed like Marvin Gaye was on top of the world, but inside, he was still struggling. Later that same year, at a low point in his struggle with depression, debt, and cocaine abuse, he had moved into his parents' Los Angeles home. He was in horrible physical, psychological, and financial shape, and the fact that he didn't get along with his father only made matters worse. By some reports, his father, Marvin Sr., was jealous over his son's tremendous success. And Marvin Jr. harbored unresolved feelings toward his alcoholic and abusive father. On the morning of April 1st, 1984, an argument between father and son escalated into a physical fight. It started when Alberta Gaye was trying to calm her son in his bedroom. Filled with rage, Marvin Sr. had enough. He grabbed a revolver, barged into the room, and pointed it at his son, shooting him 3 times in his chest. The screams of his mother and the gunshots were deafening. Hearing the commotion, Marvin Gaye's brother Frankie, who lived next door, rushed to his brother's side. As the blood rushed out and the light faded from Marvin's eyes, he had only one thing left to say. I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I made him do it. Marvin Gaye passed away only one day before what would have been his 45th birthday. Instead of celebrating him with cake, his family mourned him with a funeral. So if you guys aren't sick of my voice yet, I will be letting you guys in on my opinions. And now growing up, I was obsessed with the movie All Dogs Go to Heaven. So when I found out that she voiced one of the characters in the movie, I felt an instant connection towards her. And learning about her story and everything she went through blows my mind. And the more I learn about it, the angrier I get. Not just at her dad, who obviously killed her, threatened to kill her, abused her, and made her life a living hell. He's an awful person, we get that. But all the other adults in her life, they also failed to protect her. I mean, yes, there are bad people, and of course we never expect our own father to be the bad person. But when the danger is staring at you right in the eye, how is that child not protected? She carried so much fear each and every single day. She was just waiting to die. Now moving on to Vic Morrow, his death was gruesome. This guy was decapitated by those helicopter blades. Now when I was younger, I was obsessed with watching videos of like those helicopter blades for some reason. And let me tell you, these blades are so fast, sharp, and deafening. When those blades come down, you don't have a choice. I can't imagine how his last moments are. Just seeing those blades come at you quickly and knowing you have no time to run, it blows my mind. I feel so sad for him and those 2 kids. They had no chance. Moving on to Andres Escobar, his case is just so stupid. I can't even imagine the amount of stress and pressure this poor guy went through. Like, yeah, he scored in the wrong goal, but it was a mistake. And it's never a reason to send death threats or even kill somebody. This is just pure stupidity. He will always be a champion in my eyes, and that killer will never be even a quarter of a man that Andres was. Now moving on to Selena Quintanilla. She was a star, and I can't even imagine what she would be doing if she was still alive. Her legacy is unmatched. You never know the intentions of others, so make sure you're really careful with who you trust and give your trust out sparingly. Now, Adrienne's case is especially sad because She was in that indie film Waitress, which I'm sure we've all heard about. I mean, that movie is so famous. It was the top film at all the festivals, and the musical even won Tony Awards. But the sad thing is that the success only happened after she died. So she never really got to partake in that success and bask in all that honor, which is really sad. John Lennon was another guy killed by a crazy fan. There's a pattern going on here. Celebrities and their crazy fans. But his last interview was so eerie. I mean, the fact that he said he would work until he died and he hoped he didn't die until a long time is so eerie. I mean, it just goes to show that you never know when your end is near. And in this case, it was only a few hours later. And now moving on to poor Christina Grimmie. She was only 22 years old. And like Selena Quintanilla, Christina Grimmie had already accomplished so much at her young age, but she still had her entire life ahead of her. It just goes to show that it really only takes one deranged person to take everything away. And now we are left with Marvin Gaye. His life was filled with ups and downs. And during his lowest moment, his dad just barged in and shot his son. Imagine that, a father shooting his son. Crazy world we live in. These Hollywood celebrities deserved so much more, but instead they met grisly ends. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!